Welcome to Chatback. Would like to welcome you to the second hour of today's edition of Chatback, the 29th of December, the year 2021. Would like to appreciate each one of you that are tuning in to this particular program. A special shout out to a lady that is tuning in from the Zambia Public Procurement Authority in Shimunya. Thank you very much for taking time to tune in. We anticipate your contribution and participation right on this particular program. I have with me Ambassador Imanu Mwamba to run us through to the top of the hour right on this very station. You can also catch us via Facebook Live. All you need to do is simply look for the Radio Christian Voice official page, post your comment on our wall, and then we'll be able to get to you and share your thoughts that you are actually bringing on. You can also call on 0967 390 albeit not just yet, but we'll definitely be opening the lines in just a moment. All right, now, there are certain aspects that you've questioned that have to do with the current administration, and this has to do with the public-private the Public-Private Partnership Council, and which had to do with the issue of the expansion and creation of road networks between Western and Northwestern Province. I want to get it from you. What have been your concerns concerning that project, which it has come to public knowledge that it was initiated by the Patriotic Front government just before the 2021 general elections?
My concerns are very simple. Public processes must be public. Public procurement processes, whether done by PPP, a public-private partnership, or directly by the state through its agencies, the process must go through a public process. Tender processes must be public. An unsolicited bid where either a developer or contractor comes and provides you with a proposal still requires that it's subjected to a public process. I'm glad that there's someone from the tender board, from the tender authority, Zambia Public Procurement Authority. Yes, there is an act that regulates procurement in public and government entities. You just don't procure. That was number one, my concern. The second concern is that this procurement is being done by an NGO, relatively small, registered at their house, run by one or two people, and then they tell you that they'll raise an amount of $3.7 billion to do 11 roads. You question the due diligence. When I raised this matter, a lot of people came on my page and said, but this was commissioned a day before elections by an address by our Honor the Vice President, Honorable Inonge Winner, and that there was an award done earlier by the Road Development Agency for the project. But I take issue with that because Honorable Milupi, who is the Minister of Infrastructure, informed us that the new ministers, the Council of Ministers that have been appointed to run PPPs, and the list was released, have approved the project. So the issue, whether it was started by the previous government, doesn't arise. The final approval has been done by this government. And then I questioned the selection of the roads. We have what we call economical roads, okay? Roads that allow our import and export and our economy to run. I have in mind the Livingstone Kafue Road. I have in mind the Chirundu Lusaka Road. I have in mind the Lusaka Copperbelt Road. I have in mind the Kitwe Mufulira Road and Kitwe Chingola to Kasumbalesa Road. I have in mind the Kapirimposhi, Mkushi, Serenje, Mpika, Chinsali, Isoka na Konde Road. That's our lifeline. Do you know the state of that road from Serenje to Mpika, Mpika to Chinsali, Chinsali to Isoka, Isoka to Nakonde? I have in mind the Livingstone Sesheke Road, the Nakatindi Road, because it takes us to, to Katimamulilo border with Namibia. So there are these economic roads that are, in many cases, in very poor state that we must prioritize. They are what we call political roads, because you want the province to like you, or you want your village to like you, you want your community to like you. Those are political roads, because you are getting them other than the purpose of economic purposes. For political purposes, maybe that you can be voted into power or your party can be liked. Remember, even when the PF were doing roads, some people questioned us spending over $400 billion in Lusaka, on Lusaka roads, when the trunk roads, that provides the lifeline of this country, are dilapidated. The Tutwa, Serenje Tutwa road up to Samfya and Mansa is also in very bad state. The Lusaka Kabwe Kapiri Ndola is a death trap. And for those that have traveled during this festive season, will tell you how dangerous that road is. It's literally a death trap. But these are the links and trunks of roads carrying this country. And you want to spend $3.7 billion on roads that provide more potential than economical. That was my question. Secondly, there was an attempt to show that if a PPP project, why should anyone worry? Because the money is not coming from you. Let me make something very, very clear. The public-private partnership project is under the charge of the Treasury. That NGO will require that this government issues a guarantee. And when you are doing your books of loans, it includes the guarantees that we have issued. That is why our debt is higher than $12.9 billion. Because we have to look at the debt that ZESCO has. Remember, we have provided a sovereign guarantee for ZESCO to develop the Kafiwe Gorge Lower at $2.something billion. So that's a guarantee. In our books, it's a PPP. That's a PP. Remember, Honorable Chitotela used to argue on the Lusaka-Ndola dual carriageway, that although people are condemning it, that it's, they were going to do it's overpriced at $1.2 billion. It's a PPP. No, even a PPP requires a sovereign guarantee. And in your books, it will show. Because if something went wrong, if there was a default from wherever the developer, concessionaire, or any other has gotten the loan from, you, the Zambian government, will pay. In this particular instance, there was $3.7 billion and a concession of 25 years, meaning our people, for a quarter of a century, are going to be levied on those roads because the developer has to tow those roads for a period of a quarter of a century. That's literally a quarter of our lives as a country. So why would you give it? My point was value. Who has assessed that it would require 25 years to recover $3.7 billion? So there were a lot of issues arising. Whether this project was started and pioneered by the previous government should never be an excuse, because the loans and guarantees that come out of there will be borne by myself and my children, by yourself and your children, by the people of Western Province, Northern Province, Eastern Province. They will bear the cost. So let us get this issue away that it's a PPP. Why is Ambassador worried about it? No, I've seen even now public-private partnerships are done in South Africa, where private entities develop roads and tow those roads for a period that the concessionaire has been given. It's still to the charge, because the asset, either you secure the road assets as yours for that period, or government gives you a guarantee. Somehow a bank will not loan you that kind of money without any form of security or guarantee. Remember, this government claims the PF was corrupt. This government claims the PF was doing things in an opaque, obscure manner. This government claims that the PF was not doing things in a transparent manner, that this government was solely engaged in single sourcing. An unsolicited bid is single sourcing it. because we have not opened competition. And we've had this practice growing, where in the fertilizer subsector, an extension was done to a contract to the tune of $50 million under a single sourcing process. The very thing we condemn, that can we use single sourcing only for purposes of emergencies as the law prescribes, than to use it for purposes of corruption or favoritism. We have seen the same process being employed, other than the public tender they've opened for fuel, that there are attempts to single source certain institutions and replace the other companies that were supplying and single source certain companies. Corruption remains corruption. Zambians hate corruption. Zambians want our leaders to hate corruption. Whether corruption is practiced by the previous government or current government, our people want us to end this culture of corruption. I come here to discuss against issues of corruption. When will a new leadership emerge that says and practices what it says? When will a new leadership emerge that should put an end to the leakages we have in the treasury? My other criticism, Lorenzo, has been the IMF. I've said you don't need them. First, if you made savings, if you run your government prudently, we raise enough resources to run our own country. I have stated that the revenues we have from the mining sector, and if we leak, if we seal leakages, I was reading a report on the extraction industry that has mentioned that Zambia loses $1 billion a year by these multinationals that refuse to pay taxes. They engage,
tax avoidance.
Yeah, they engage in tax avoidance schemes. They have top of the end, accountants from across the world and lawyers that will study your law, its statutes. They will study your tax law in particular and engage in activities that will ensure that they pay as minimal or little or no tax at all. We are losing $1 billion a year. Why would you need the IMF? Especially with the history of the IMF in this country. Why would you need them? You have some of the best and clearest emeralds coming from Lufwanyama. We are the second largest producer of emeralds in the world. The owners of those mines are millionaires in US dollars. What do we have to show for Lufwanyama and for this country? We have copper that's trading now very highly, and cobalt, very relevant to the electric motor vehicle industry. And for cobalt, it's required in lithium batteries. What are we doing with our copper? The mines in Northwestern Province are gold mines. Don't tell me what I'm talking about are long-term issues. The amount of gold that is produced from Northwestern Province, we might as well call those gold mines. Let's not call them copper mines. So why are we allowing our resource to go to waste? Why are we quick to get quick loans from the IMF and others? And government always has huge appetite for loans. It's the easiest, it's the laziest way to run an economy. Just get a huge loan, and then it meets your expenditure. You are home and dry.
But the counter argument would be that the Patriotic Front government wanted this very IMF loan for over 7 years, but without success. So how does the narrative change now that the PF, your party, is in the opposition, Ambassador?
Lorenzo, my view has always been consistent. Whether the IMF is being pursued by the Patriotic Front or by the New Dawn government, my assessment is still the same. We were a good country with a huge manufacturing base. We were feeding ourselves. We were manufacturing everything. We were substituted our imports as a country. And of course, because of politics and because of imprudent management, some of those state-owned enterprises were running at losses. When the IMF came, they deal with you like a company, even if you are a country, even if you have people there. They just said, all loss-making companies, sell them, liquidate them, privatize them. We had 245 companies. How many are standing? the current rate of unemployment arises from our decisions in the 1990s with the IMF. We were deindustrialized. Our industries died. Ghost towns emerged. Street kids emerged. The rate of poverty shot up. Some say, no, our economy became informal, enterprise rose, and people survive well. Ask any entrepreneur if they are supported by government. Ask any entrepreneur if they are supported even by the banking sector. We are as good as unemployed adults. Even if someone says he's a businessman, the cycle of difficulties they go through, they might have 10% in the year. Come to 2010. First, let's go to 2005. We've started, because of the Jubilee Coalition and the world, and remember the Catholic in Zambia were very involved, cancel this $7 billion debt. It's an unfair debt. Besides, you people in the West, you cause this debt. You don't allow us to sell our raw materials at our price. You determine the price of copper in London.
The London Metal Exchange. You
determine everything. This debt that Africa is yoked to is unsustainable. And you know that's an unfair debt. And we, with the conscience of the world, led even by the Pope, that debt was cancelled. There was a Jubilee coalition of a lot of people that came together. 2005, in the year 2000, Zambia qualified to the decision point, and in 2005, we qualified to the completion point, and our debt was cancelled. 2006, 2007 to 2010, we were debt-free. We had space, what they call fiscal space. We had money to invest in our economy, and our economy began to grow. And by 2010, we had been growing consistently from 2005 to 2010 at a rate of, we jumped to 7%, 8%, and at one time we were at 10%. The IMF see the growth of these countries, including Ghana, including Seychelles and Mauritius. They said, you countries, by World Bank classification, you are no longer poor countries. You are now low middle income countries. Remember, there are 4 classifications. You are low, who are quite poor, then you have the low middle income, then you have the high middle income, and then you have the ones at the top. So 4 classifications. So we jumped a rung higher, and they said, you are no longer poor, so you don't need loans from IMF, World Bank, and other institutions that provide concession loans. You are qualified to get loans from the market. We didn't go to Eurobond market on our own. No, it was on the instructions of the IMF. Remember, Sweden and other countries even closed their embassies, not Sweden, I think it's the Netherlands and other NGOs, even closed, shut their embassies and moved to Zimbabwe because you were no longer a poor country. And they said, now you can access loans from the market. They do these experiments on us. And we went to the market. So today they're telling us that you have a huge debt. They know our appetite for debt is very high. You tell an African, go and borrow, my God. They like to borrow things they don't even return. And within a period of 10 years, we had accumulated a loan of $12.9 billion from the markets. $3 billion from the Eurobond, $5.8 billion from China. Most of it is project financing, where, like for example, Kafue-Loa Gorge is a project finance where China is funding a project, but it still remains dead. And we have other creditors, up to 41 creditors. So my anger is, who sent us to the market? We were happy, we were okay to borrow from the IMF and World Bank because the loans are concessional loans. Their period is longer, and the default rate must be very low. You send a government that is trying to just settle. Remember, we had just posted good growth for 5 years. Our economy was still fragile, but you sent us to the markets, to the wolves. And today you come and said, no, you are highly indebted. It's your fault. Your leaders overborrowed. You forget. Lorenzo, kakongole shirishonse ndalaman. Now we'll see how I can pay. Look at the latitude that you have been given. We were given that same latitude. The indiscipline in borrowing, you see, is the latitude the IMF gave us. Go to the market. So when they come here, and we cry for them, we run to them, the PF ran for them for 7 years. This government is celebrating that it has achieved an IMF deal within 100 days. They are celebrating. And for me, that causes me sadness. That's not a thing to celebrate. Because they've told you, remove subsidies for fuel. It's an uneconomical subsidy. It's unproductive. It's not targeted. Why are you having that subsidy? Remove subsidies on electricity tariffs. Let your people pay at cost-reflective tariff. If ZESCO is buying from Mamba Collieries, Mamba Power at 11 cents, your people should buy above 11 cents per kilowatt. They can't be buying power at 3 cents. That is the IMF. They say, you show us on your books that you can you can raise your own domestic revenue. First, to service debt. They are very interested in you servicing the debt, because the people you owe, the pensioners in America, are bothering them. We lent a country called Zambia through the Eurobond market, which you and these companies that promote the savings lent to us. The pensioners are pressuring them. So one of their key interests as IMF is, can you service your debt? And remember our budget, it literally has 2 items before we even develop our country. Debt service, and we're paying civil servants, about 200,000 of them. We are paying over 53%. I don't know how much it will jump to when we include the 41,000 employees that this government has included. So it might jump from 53% of our domestic revenue to a higher number. So when we say be cautious with the IMF, this is what we mean. They've said reduce your spending on FISIP, the Farmer Support Input Program. The Minister of Finance announced that it will be reduced from 2.8% of GDP to 1%. What it means is that list that benefits from the FISIP program will be cut substantially lower. If it's at 1.1 million, it might come to 400,000. Look at the number, 2.8% of the GDP to only 1%. The amount that we are spending on fertilizer will be cut down very, very drastically. So what will happen to your bumper harvest? Our commercial farmers do not produce this bumper harvest. Government needs to know that. The bumper harvest is produced by our people. It's not produced by ordinary people, by commercial farmers. So when you cut subsidies to our people and you say you want to be exporting maize to Congo, to the DRC and other countries, how will you do it? That's a trouble with the IMF. So we make it very clear, whether the IMF project was pursued by the IMF or was by the previous government, the PF, or by this government, the concerns remain the same. In fact, if you speak to all the 3 former ministers, Felix Mutati, Dr. Margaret Monakatwe, and Dr. Bwalyangandu, they'll tell you one of the sticking issues was these social spending. Because government, the PF government, refused to cut costs on fertilizer, electricity, on fuel. They said there are some subsidies a country must sustain. So the IMF were in trouble with that. They couldn't clinch a deal. I noticed that Honorable Felix Mutati was revealing a cabinet matter where he claimed that he informed cabinet that IMF couldn't grant the deal because we had just procured a road of $1.2 billion and we're looking for $1.3 billion. First of all, I found that extremely unethical for Dr. Felix Mutati to disclose and reveal happenings in cabinet. Those proceedings are secured for a period of 25 years and they are regulated by the, the State Securities Act. So he should be very careful when you begin to make and discuss cabinet, particular cabinet proceedings. They are regulated by law. And so that's number 1. But number 2 is I don't think he was telling the truth. Yes, there were concerns about that road. In fact, I remember that President Lungu ordered the review of the cost of that road. So all those things that were there, that they'll build hotels and filling stations, were substantially removed, and the $1.2 billion came down to somewhere around $700 million. So I found the announcement by Honorable Felix Mutati on Sunday interview totally unfortunate for those two reasons. He wasn't being truthful and he was breaking the law. But if you speak, for example, to Honorable Waliangandu, Mkalambawandi, Honorable Waliangandu, he will tell you they had almost clinched the deal in 2020. But except for those two reasons, that remove fuel subsidies, he said no. Remove electricity subsidies, he said no. And this is on record. Ministry of Finance can confirm this. So this government has rushed to the deal. Well, it's a mark in their economic models. I've always said it's like all our economists and policymakers are bewitched. They always think in one straight way, in one straight jacket. I don't know if we will ever develop, if we think that loans will develop this country. If we think that our natural resources should be exploited by foreigners. If we think that we can't, as a country, run the mines, that we can't, as a country, run a proper tax system to raise revenue to develop this country. The lazy way of running the country is to rush to the IMF and get any other loan.
All right.
My other concern, the national budget. This budget is a $10 billion budget. Nice and ambitious. But where will the revenue and supply side come from? And the minister has told us that he will borrow up to $4.2 billion. That for me concerns me. I thought you already have a high budget. Why are you borrowing $4.2 billion? And remember, you also want to do a concession of $3.7 billion for those roads. It means in a period of 4 months, you've borrowed $7 billion. That's what it means. Aren't our people concerned about debt? Aren't they blasting the PF that they accumulated a debt of $12.9 billion in a period of 10 years? And you are accumulating a debt of $7 billion in 4 months? Are we learning anything from our people? Are we listening to the concerns of our people? Clearly not. So I've heard that, no. We will draw down. Remember, we have a special drawing rights that came from the IMF because we are members. We are members of the IMF. I should make that very clear. And they gave all the countries across the world because of the coronavirus pandemic and its effect on the economic status of countries. For Zambia, they gave us $1.3 billion. So the minister said he would draw down some of those monies. Now, so the 41,000 that we are employing, we will use these special drawing rights from the IMF, $1.3 billion. So what happens in 2023 when we don't have that money? What will happen to the people we have employed? How will we support the public sector wage bill? Because that's a one-off payment. It doesn't come every day. I've seen that they will draw down on the savings that we have made as a country, and now we have foreign reserves taking us up to 5 months import cover. So they are saying we will reduce that maybe to 2 or 3 months import cover. For me, that's just bringing instability. Can we live within our means? The issue of these borrowings, our people have been very, very specific about it, Lorenzo, to an extent that we've put it in our constitution that every time government wishes to borrow, they should take such intentions for approval and ratification to Parliament. That's how our people have expressed their concern on debt. Remember, even Dr. Kaunda, one of the factors why he lost elections in 1991 and that the economy had collapsed was the issue of debt. He had accumulated $7 billion debt, and at that stage our economy was quite small, about 3.5 billion. That was our GDP. So we were double the GDP. So why are we walking back to those crises? So Zambians, be alert. Don't be excited that this is a new government. Nabambo Kongoland even at a far rapid rate than at a far rapid rate than the PF. It worries me.
All right. Now, you have not hidden the fact that you have political ambition to become the Patriotic Front's president at the next convention. Now, kindly tell the people listening in, what is motivating you to become PF president? And how do you hope to change the negative perception that people have of the PF that could have cost them an election in August? My third point is, tell us where you're coming from.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a journalist, I'm a banker, I've been a diplomat.
You rose to fame when you were spokesperson to the late Dr. Chilu.
Yes, yes.
That is where most people could actually trace you.
Yes,
from.
yes.
All right. So,
no, if
your career from.
Yeah, if there's any time, you know, I'm grateful. It's a period that I served with Dr. Frederick Jacob Titus Chiluba. He was our second president. I met him after he left office in 2002. And before long, he had made me his administrator and his official spokesperson. I was this young, courageous young man who would stand against President Mwanawasa. President Mwanawasa was driving a very aggressive anti-corruption agenda. It was a public process to, you know, prosecute Dr. Chiluba in the media, not in the courts of law. And Dr. Chiluba and his colleagues were highly scandalized, and that I was a young man at the center to do those rebuttals because Dr. Chiluba appointed me as official spokesperson. You remember that President Mwanawasa actually even fired me from the civil service. He said, "Who are you? You are a civil servant and you are responding to me on political matters. You can't be responding to me, you are a civil servant." I said, "But I run an office and my boss is Dr. Chiluba, and I'm his office." Reinstated me. President Mwanawasa was totally wrong. I was just doing my job and the courts affirmed that particular matter. What I learned from Dr. Chiluba, he was lonely at the time, alone, isolated, a former president, and who had run away from him. And, you know, for me, God had taken me there for a purpose, because for 10 years I sat under his feet. Many people say I've been unfair, I haven't done his memoirs. Yes, I need to do his memoirs, because if there's anyone who intimately knows the story of Dr. Chiluba, it is myself, because I sat with him for 10 years when he was at his loneliest period and when he had all the time in the world. So you can imagine the stories, the experiences he told me of his life running government, you know, his role in the trade union, his references across the world. So it was a big school for me. It was a very, very big life lessons, government lessons. It was a very big school for me. I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. You know, when God has given you assignment, all I knew was that I just needed to speak and do my job. Friends, families, I was affected. I was isolated because people didn't want to be in trouble with government. I remember walking into government offices. Remember, I was a civil servant running the office of the second president. And you walk into a permanent secretary's office, the first thing he does is to stand again and open the door, leave it wide. Lest he's accused of anything, is what I mean. People were afraid to associate with me, it rubbed on me. Because when they looked at the issues of Dr. Chiluba, I was the face of those issues. They didn't know that I didn't serve in his government, that I never served him when he was in government. They had no idea. All they knew is there's this young, vibrant journalist who speaks for him, who has owned the issues of Dr. Chiluba. So I was an ordinary boy who was unknown, and that office made who Emmanuel Mwamba is. By 2011, you know, President Michael Sata appointed me as permanent secretary, and I served in Northern Province where we did a lot of things. We found one of my hallmark issues, there were two issues. Other than the water projects we began to do in Nakonde, Chinsali, Isoka, Kaputa, and Mpulungu, and the township roads were rolling out, and the markets, they started under President Michael Sata. I did the divisions with colleagues, of course, from local government and others, of Muchinga out of Northern Province. It was a huge undertaking that we achieved at a very short period. There was a company called Northern Coffee that used to export coffee to Japan and across Europe. And coffee from Kasama is one of the best. Mukanweko coffee of Kasama. Ilanungila isuma, very nice. It's beautiful. And that company was closed for a period of 5 years. The previous investor just came, borrowed an amount of $11 million and disappeared. So the banks had taken over. There was a liquidator. We engaged in discussion. I traveled to Lusaka, engaged Zambia Development Agency. And within a period of 3 to 6 months, that company was opened. At the moment, it is the largest private employer in Northern Province. It has the largest number of farmers, small-scale farmers that support it. They also grow coffee up to 3,650. It's one of our success stories, and we need to pursue that story. They are now exporting to Japan, to where? We began, there was an issue I was interested in, Mpulungu Harbor, when I was PS there. And I noticed that across Bujumbura in Burundi, they actually call our cement, because we've been exporting since the 70s, cement in Burundi is called Chilanga. So I was surprised to learn that cement is called, and then they've built a huge harbor. But harbors are like airports. If you can't land a big plane here, you have to have equal airports of equal size. So we have a huge harbor that has been developed in Bujumbura, in Burundi. Another one that is being developed in Rwanda, and Tanzania is doing the same. But look at our Mpulungu Harbor. Quite small. It can't handle huge capacities of ship. And remember, Lake Tanganyika is the deepest lake, second deepest lake in the world after, Baka of Russia. So we began that process. There was Africa Development Bank country director who was very development focused, and he engaged many permanent secretaries that were interested in development. And we started a process to ensure that Mpulungu Harbor should be expanded. And I think by the time I was leaving, the issues of feasibility studies and funding for feasibility studies was underway. I served in Eastern Province. Abantu abakuchipata mwalishi wefe wava. They welcomed me. I worked very well with them, and there are intricacies in Eastern Province, the Chewas, Ngonis, how you handle those sensitive matters and Sengas, and also just the development agenda of Eastern Province. I proposed that Chipata be a city, and I wrote letters of recommendations to both the Minister of Local Government and to the President Michael Sata. I'm glad Chipata now is a city. Of course, my colleagues that succeeded me also pursued the matter. My dear brother Chandakasolo also pursued it, and even the other PSs, and Chipata is now a city, but my best time was in Western Province. The intricacies, the heritage, the history of that province requires that you are adept, you are sensitive, you just don't make a decision. You and your minister have to be very alert to all the issues that occur in that province. And, something I loved about Western provinces, you can go deep into Skongo or Kalabo, and you find this very old lady, extremely old. You're speaking to, especially on social community matters, where you are supporting maybe a social cash transfer, you are visiting the poorest of the region. You find this old lady, until she opens her mouth, her English. Oh my God, you want to look for an interpreter. Then when she speaks, her English is far better than even yours. So there's a history of education in Western Province that I truly admired. So my Makwenyans kept me very well in Western Province. I worked very well with the Litunga. I worked very well with the BRI and with the communities.
So with your vast experience, do you count yourself as the best candidate that the PF can field to challenge or to try to wrestle back power from the UPND?
I understand local issues. I've been privileged to be a diplomat as ambassador to South Africa, ambassador to Ethiopia. In diplomatic capitals, these are some of the most busiest missions across the world. Yeah, it's New York, Geneva, Addis Ababa, and places like South Africa, and China, of course. I've been privileged to serve in South Africa and in Ethiopia, and you saw what and the work that we're involved in. If you are looking for someone to help this country, you need to look at the experiences. You see the numerous mistakes that President Hakainde Hichilema and his government are making. Most of them are coming from total inexperience. Most of the mistakes might be honest mistakes. Most of the mistakes could be sincere, being done out of ignorance. You know, it's not that maybe the mistakes are being done out of ignorance. What I see is that sincerely they are learning. I don't know how long it will take them to learn their work on the job. And for this government, I pity it because, you know, when I look at the structure of government, structure of advisors, most of them are from the private sector. The intricacies of government is a huge bureaucracy. It requires learning on its own. In fact, in Singapore, in America, they actually have government schools, you know, specialized in teaching both leaders and civil servants. The orientation workshop for a day doesn't do it. Either you have to serve in government for many years, or you have to go to NIPA. NIPA those days, which is our government school, required a new recruit of civil servants to spend 6 months at NIPA. That's the depth of the work in government. So people come with this attitude, they're from the private sector. And you know, in the private sector, we have a sense of efficiency. The regulations are all tightened to ensuring that work is done. Government is the opposite. In fact, government regulations are designed that things can only be done if you follow the regulations. Some of us who are reformist in nature say the regulations of government are designed to fail you because you can't do anything if you follow to the letter, to the I, to the T required if you are to do anything in government. It's like the system is designed for you to fail. And when you jump any process, the Auditor General will come. You've misapplied funds. You've misused funds. To the people, they'll think you've stolen the money. Let me give you an example. You have no salaries. People have no money. Your workers have not been paid. But you've budgeted for a bridge and you haven't finished the procurement process. In your mind as permanent secretary, you say, this bridge, we can budget for it next year. Can I have my pensioners and allowances paid? Can I have my civil servants paid? If you pay, the money hasn't come to you. Let's say it's 1 billion kwacha. If you pay that money against what it was designed for, you literally have stolen that money, even if you have not benefited a single way. So government regulations are extremely intricate, and this government is suffering from it. You know, we have an acting secretary to cabinet who's very experienced. His deputy, Oliver Kalabo, is very experienced, but the colleagues at State House are not. They're from the private sector. I've seen some letters that should never be written in government being written. I shudder at the mistakes they're making. Lack of experience. Wow. So here I am, Lorenzo. I say, why has the Lord blessed me with all these vast experiences? I've lived and stayed in shackles, in the bush, in camps, slept in you know, like most MPs will tell you, the difficulties of serving in the rural areas. And I was there for a period of 4 years. And then I've been, you know, to international bodies like the African Union, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. I've engaged, you know, in various missions to the US, to Senegal, to Kigali, to across Africa. So when I returned, having been away for the last 7 years, and there's a leadership contest in the Patriotic Front, I'm offering myself. I said, "Mwantu wakwalesa nane mbone nipo, mumwansambilishe, ni mwemo ampele chance." Because God uses vessels. He used the vessel of President Michael Sata, President Edgar Lungu, for me to be where I am, and former President Dr. Frederick Chiluba.
Wow. All right, we seem to have run out of time. We probably need to have a part two to our discussion so that we get to have you also outline and share with the listeners some of the points that you needed shared right on this very platform. We'd like to appreciate you. In about a minute, what would be your concluding remarks, Ambassador Mwamba?
Mwe bantu wa Kabwata natumiletera omwana wenu Clement Tembo. Clement Tembo mwana wenu akulira mu Kabwata, went to school in Kabwata. Even when he became successful, he returned to Kabwata. Ndelo mbabena Kabwata. Ilo balesala pa January 20. Balolekeshe papa mwana wabo Clement Tembo. And God bless you. To our listeners, and Lorenzo, there's something I wanted to end with. Let me just quickly get it.
Okay.
Because many people ask me, Emmanuel, why are you bold? Why are you fearless? Why do you stand against these authorities? You know, like people used to fear for my life under President Mwanawasa, and you know, even things I'm doing now. People are saying, "Shut up, keep quiet." You know. So they always ask me, "But what strengthens you?" And I would like to, take them to Psalm 91. It was Dr. Chiluba's favorite verse. I've adopted it as my own, and it says, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I'll say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." So what's my pillar? I just run to God. When the forces appear so strong against me, I just run to God. If you are with God, you are in the majority.
Beautiful. All right, so that is all time we had on the program. Coming up is news, then Chipo picks it up with lifestyle. Enjoy the rest of our programming, and God richly bless you.